Hello and welcome back to Web Development and Design, and welcome to Module 5, Dreamweaver CSS. I'm really excited to open this module up because from up to this point we have really been concentrating on laying the groundwork for web design, doing research, looking at what makes a good website, learning a little bit about HTML, and gathering our assets together to prepare the layout. So now in Module 5, we will actually be creating a layout from scratch. And let's look at our objectives for this module, and this is really the objectives for the Project 4 textbook tutorial, and that's the Museum Layout CSS. So in that tutorial, you'll be creating and linking an external CSS file. You'll be editing CSS rules to adjust the layout, create a layout with the HTML elements, work with templates. So if you've worked with templates in Adobe InDesign, it's the same concept, so that you can use one template and apply it to all the pages across your website. And then you'll define HTML tag selectors, ID selectors, and compound selectors, and we'll be talking more in depth about those kind of selectors. Really in the tutorial though, you'll be concentrating on the tag selectors and ID selectors, and we'll talk more about class selectors in the next module. You will use divs or containers to create a layout. Now there are so many different ways to go about web design in Dreamweaver, and you can watch all different kinds of videos from different sites. But for this project and for this class, we will be using divs to create a layout. And you may prefer a different way to design your site, and we'll look at some different things. But for this module, we're really going to focus in on using these containers called divs to create our layout. And that's what we'll be doing in the tutorial. So what is due this week and in this module? March 28th is Homework 7, the club project, and that can be found, the directions are on page 213 in your textbook. You can also look carefully at the assignment sheet on the course page for Homework 7. And this is going to be a site really that you design from the ground up. All that you're provided from Against the Clock is the text that you need to include, which includes for the 5 web pages plus a home page, so that makes 6 pages total. Then you will create and attach a CSS file with adding some styles to your pages. And you'll be given the logo from Against the Clock if you download the files for that assignment. And I don't expect this site to be as refined as the professional site and the portfolio that you'll be turning in at the end of the semester. This is really just for you to gain some practice towards those end site goals. But you do need to have 6 pages and you do need to follow the instructions. So again, I don't expect it to be that refined, but it's really just to give you practice on how to create a site with multiple pages. And then you'll take quiz 3. So after you complete project 4 in your textbook, then you'll want to take quiz 3 to give you an overview, a review really of that project. And I'm going to go over that, some more of the terminology for that. So what is CSS? It allows you to create rules that specify how the content of the element should appear, and that can be for the box width, or when I'm talking about box, I mean the container or div that you're using for your layout. That can include the width and the height of the box, the borders, any background colors and images, the position in the browser, which can be floated to the left or right, or it could be an absolute or fixed position, and of course all your type styles. CSS style rules, we can look a little bit at the HTML code. It really contains 2 parts, the selector and then the declaration, and the declaration includes property and value. You can have more than one property. In this case, we have a paragraph selector. The property is the font family, and it's assigning a value to the property, so the Arial font is what's being assigned to this property. Now we can look at multiple properties. You can have H1, H2, H3, all these tag selectors are being assigned or given a declaration of the font family Arial plus the color green, and those are separated by a semicolon. So you can have assign more than one property to a selector. We'll look at the differences between external style sheet, embedded, and inline style. And so really we're looking at individual elements to apply a style to a single element on the page. An embedded style will be to assign a style to something within a page. So if you're just working with one web page, you can use an embedded style and use the style tags. But what we're doing and what our end goal for your final projects, as well as the tutorial we're doing in this module, we're really looking at external style sheets, which is a separate file containing the CSS rules, and this can be attached to multiple pages, and that really gives you an advantage when you're designing more than one web page, which is what you'll be doing for one site. So we'll be looking at external style sheets. So internal versus external, again, when you're building a site with more than one page, you really want to use an external CSS style sheet, and those are the advantages of why we want to do that. You want to use the link element, and this is what that tag looks like. It's telling you this is the path to the CSS style, and then you can add the text /CSS tells us this is the type of document it's being linked to, and then our relationship here element is telling us this is the relationship between the HTML page and the link file, and it's a style sheet, so it's a CSS style sheet. Different types of CSS selectors are listed here in this chart, and really we'll be looking at ID selectors in this tutorial, which is always going to be begin with that hashtag or number symbol, and remember that attribute can only be given to a single element. And then the child selector, which is a direct child of another element. So here we've got a list element. The child is this A tag. And then the descendant or compound selector. And then that's going to give you a path here where you've got the paragraph and then this A tag within the paragraph, so that the A tag is the descendant of the parent tag here. And we'll look at that more closely again in the tutorial, which I will provide another step-by-step guided video to walk you through that. We'll again be looking at class selectors later on in the next module, and that is always preceded by the period, and a class selector can be attributed to more than one item. So that's the difference between a class and an ID selector. Our type selector are our tag selectors that apply to any instance where you use the heading H1, H2, or H3, and other tags like that. I'm just going to move on kind of quickly because I'm going to do another overview video that will have more detail. Our CSS box, this is our container, and we'll be placing content in the container. So this is where you might place your text or image. And then our gray area is the padding, and that's really like the inset between the edge of our box and our content. Then we've got the border around our container box. And then in the dotted area here is the margin. That's the area outside of your container. I've provided additional resources in this module. So in addition to the supplement, which I'm providing for the step-by-step tutorial to guide you through Against the Clock, you can also subscribe, make sure you get the student rate to lynda.com, and these are all hyperlinks. If you want to download, look at this PDF file on our course page, you can click to go directly to these sites. So if you want to go, I selected a particular video on lynda.com if you want to look at this CSS overview. So if you do a search on lynda.com of managing CSS, there's a bunch of videos there on CSS, beginning with the preferences if you want to set custom preferences. And you can just go down the list and select any tutorials that you think will be helpful to you. Then there's also Adobe, which should be free to you. These videos, the one I have selected here is CSS Web Layout Basics. So these just go into more detail on CSS. You can also hear some of the tutorials have really cool accents, so that might be more interesting to you than hearing my voice. So you can go on and search for some videos. And then also Adobe TV, and this video I've selected is again working with the CSS Designer panel. Just to back up on the adobe.com video that I've highlighted here, that one is really done by using the source code only and also quick edit to add CSS selectors. And that's different from what we'll be doing in the Against the Clock tutorial. We'll use the CSS Designer panel to add our selectors and containers to our selector properties to give our containers. But this is a different way of doing it. So if you're more interested in looking at more coding, you might want to take a look at that video and do it and follow that. Also, make sure after you're done with your site, you can look at your site on different browsers. Just keep in mind that different browsers will display these properties differently. So a CSS style may look different on one browser depending on how it chooses to display it. So you might want to look at different browsers, but rather than trying to gather as many browsers as possible or purchasing different computers if you want to look at PC or Mac, I only use Macs, and so I don't really have the time or money to look at how these sites look on different computer platforms. But if you are interested and you want to do more websites in the future, you can look at these sites that will show you what your site will look like on different browsers. So you can select all different browsers to check kind of what the display is going to look like. You can also check out these sites if you're running into a CSS bug. Sometimes some of the CSS styles may not show up the way you intend, or there may be some kind of bug. So you can go to these sites to see if there are any kind of fixes for any problems you may run into. So again, I have not used these personally, but John Duckett, who wrote HTML and CSS Design and Build Websites, can vouch for those sites. So I would trust his expertise on that.